Hello, this is Albert Dom with another Dante video. I'm sitting in my non-squeaky chair again, so hopefully no squeaks or anything like that. So today we're going to be doing cantos 4 and 5. It's limbo in the second circle of hell. And last time we just got across the river with the aid of Charon, at least we think we do. And so Dante's on the other shore. During the transport by Charon, he was unconscious. Now he's woken up. And Virgil says to him, "Let us descend into the sightless world," began the poet. His face was deathly white pale. "I will go first, and you will follow me." And I, aware of his changed color, said, "But how can I go on if you are frightened? You are my constant strength when I lose heart." And he said to me, "The anguish of the souls that are down here paints my face with pity, which you have wrongly taken to be fear. Let us go. The long road urges us." He entered then, leading the way for me down to the first circle of the abyss. Well, Dante is a little worried, of course, and for several reasons. Of course, he's in hell, and he's still in the early parts of his journey, still has a sin clinging to him, and he's not at all confident. And Virgil, being unconfident, or at least unconfident looking, worries even more. So Virgil says, "Nah, I'm not worried. I'm just upset with anguish of the souls that are down here." Well, maybe, maybe not. We really don't know. Virgil may be not exactly being honest with Dante, just so to keep him strong for the journeys. Now, here is the cross-section of hell. We're up here. We got to the vestibule where we remember the souls that would not make a decision for or against good. They resided here. Now we just crossed the Archarian River, and now we're on the other shore. We're about to go to limbo. You see, each of these circles is a concentric. They get smaller as we go down. The first circles, or upper hell, are the sins of the lepers or incontinence, where your will is simply weak. You're giving in to sin. Sin is something that appeals to you, but it's more of a weak will. Now, when you get to the city of Dis, which we will probably next week, you have more of a will that's actively evil, that is stronger will, but a will is perverted. And as you go down, you get the sins of violence. Then even further, you get the sins of true malice down here, until at the very bottom, here is Satan. And Satan is encased in ice. In Dante's hell, the center is not fire, it's ice. We'll find out sometime why that is, why it's ice. All right, let's continue. Down there, to judge only by what I heard, there's no wails, but only the sounds of sighs rising and trembling through the timeless air. And down there, he means limbo. First circle we're going to visit here. Then the good master said, "Do not ask what sort of souls are these you see around you. Now, you should know before we go on farther that they have not sinned. But their great worth alone was not enough, for they did not know baptism, which is the gateway to the faith you follow. And if they came before the birth of Christ, they did not worship God the way one should. I myself are a member of this group." Virgil is in limbo. He's in limbo because although he was a virtuous pagan, he was nonetheless pagan. Baptism and profession of faith in Christ is the way to salvation, and he did not have that. And you notice also he talks about people who came before the birth of Christ did not worship God the way one should. In other words, they were not Jews, or they did not follow any type of the Jewish faith, and thus they are not tortured or anything. They just live in a state of natural happiness, which is, as they've discovered, not enough. And so here we are, the unbaptized. Again, he's born across the Archeon, and he sleep. He comes onto the brink of the sad valley of the abyss. Sad in only one sense, in that they cannot achieve what we all ultimately desire, union with God and to know God. And that's Inferno. And he'll see the philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, a number of other people. And you can see here he's talking to some of these people, these the great poets of antiquity. And they're wearing the laurel crown of poetic excellence. And they're all very excellent and good people, but in a sense, they're not good in the sense that they're not baptized, they're not following Jesus. And Dante, or I should say Virgil goes on, says, "For this defect and for no other guilt we are lost. And this alone we suffer, cut off from hope, we live on in desire." The words I heard weighed heavily on my heart, to think that souls as virtuous as these were suspended in that limbo, and forever. Did any ever leave here through his merit or with another's help and go to bliss? And he who understood my hidden question answered, "I was a novice in this place when I saw a mighty Lord descend to us, who wore the sign of victory as his crown. He took from us the shade of our first parent, of Abel, his good son, of Noah too, and of obedient Moses, who made the laws. Abram, the patriarch, David the king, Israel with his father and his children, with Rachel, whom he worked so hard to win." Now, what this refers to is something that is called the harrowing of hell, with the idea that it's what we proclaim in the Apostles' Creed, descend into hell, with the idea that after he died, he did indeed go down to hell, in the sense he went to limbo, and he took back with him the virtuous people of the Old Testament, the Jews, as he said, Abel, Abraham, all these folks, Noah too. And this is referred to perhaps in a couple of New Testament passages. First one here is 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 19 through 22, in which he went, and he's referring to Christ, of course, and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who once were disobedient, when the patience of God kept waiting in the day of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 people, were brought safely through the water. Corresponding to that, I should say, baptism now saves you, not the removal of dirt from the flesh, but appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven after angels and authorities and powers have been subjected to him. Well, the idea being that the place of prison was limbo, and he came and preached to these people. And you see that St. Peter here is taking the idea of Noah's flood and saying that just as Noah was saved in the flood by water, we are saved by water through baptism. Another reference is here in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Now, this expression, he ascended, what does it mean except that he also has descended into the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is himself also he who ascended far above all the heavens, so that he might fill all things. And they again said, he led captive a host of captives. And again, the idea that he descended to the lower parts of the earth. That would seem to be some clue. The problem in limbo, the contrapassio, and I hope you remember what contrapassio is, the idea that in hell and in purgatory too, in a different fashion, sins are punished in an appropriate, sometimes ironic fashion, in that you get what you desire, or at least a form of it, or at least you see your sin as it is. And the people in limbo, without hope, we live on in desire. And this seems, certainly to us, I think, of this age, to be a very kind of unfortunate, petty, perhaps even some people's minds, type of thing, that simply because you did not know Jesus, due to the fact that you were in some land that never heard of Jesus, you still don't go to heaven. And you're simply here in limbo. But Dorothy Sayers, and if you have her book, you can take a look at what she says. Dorothy Sayers has a good summary of this, in that she says that, well, what's the issue here is a lack of imagination. They did not imagine heaven as union with God. They imagined heaven to be Elysian fields or some such as that. And they get exactly what they imagined the afterlife to be, but now they realize that it traps them in a state of perpetual want, in a certain sense. Although they do not suffer, and they simply, again, without hope, they live on in desire. And after they had talked a while together, they turned with a gesture welcoming me, and he's referring to a group of poets. And at that sign I saw my master smile. Greater honor still they deigned to grant me. They welcomed me as one of their group, so that I now numbered 6 among such minds. We walked together towards the shining light, discussing things that here are best kept silent, as there were most fitting for discussion. We reached the boundaries of a splendid castle that 7 times was circled by high walls, defended by a sweetly flowing stream. Well, of course, Dante is having perhaps even a little fun here. He's saying, well, all these great poets of antiquity took him as his equal. And maybe there's a little pride there. I don't know. You'll have to decide. And here is the great castle that he's going to. This is a picture by Victoria Olsen depicting that castle that he's going to. And this is a castle which will have the great philosophers and have some other famous people. And we can see, continuing in the canto, there was Electra standing with a group, among whom I saw Hector and Aeneas, and Caesar, falcon-eyed and fully armed. I saw Camilla and Penthesileia. Across the way, I saw the Latin king with Lavinia, his daughter, by his side. I saw Brutus, who drove out to Tarquin, Lucretia, Julia, Marcia, and Cornelia. Off by himself, I noted Saladin. And when I raised my eyes a little higher, I saw the master sage of those who know, sitting with his philosophical family. Euclid, the geometer, and Ptolemy, Hippocrates, Galen, Avicenna, and Averroes, who made the commentary. Well, several things are kind of interesting here. First of all, you notice that Saladin is in limbo. You may have expected him to be somewhere else, maybe a bit lower, because he, after all, the great opponent of the Crusaders, he captured Jerusalem. But he had a reputation of being a courtly person and a fair opponent in the Middle Ages. So he gets his ticket punched for limbo. Two other Muslims are here in limbo, Avicenna and Averroes. These two people made an Arabic translation of Aristotle, which then went to the Western Europe and caused a great uproar and a great intellectual ferment, which eventually led to St. Thomas Aquinas writing the Summa Theologica, first of all to defend Catholic doctrine by an assault by the philosophical findings of these translations of Aristotle, and also incorporating Aristotle, which, or at least what parts of Aristotle could be incorporated to defend the scripture and defend Catholic understanding of doctrine. And by the way, Aristotle is the master sage of those who know. That he didn't need to be named in the Middle Ages. He was just the master of them that know. And indeed, St. Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa, calls him simply the philosopher. Well, we have the thorny problem of what about people who don't know Jesus, or the unbaptized babies and such as that. And we as Catholics, we always want to baptize infants as soon as possible, because we're concerned about an unbaptized person, infant though they would be, coming into the afterlife with the burden of original sin. And here is one quote from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, 1257, I should say. The Lord himself affirms that baptism is necessary for salvation. He also commands his disciples to proclaim the gospel to all nations and to baptize them. Baptism is necessary for salvation for those to whom the gospel has been proclaimed and who have had the possibility of asking for this sacrament. The Church does not know of any other means other than baptism that assures entry into eternal beatitude. This is why she takes care not to neglect the mission she has received from the Lord to see that all who can be baptized are reborn of water and the Spirit. God has bound salvation to the sacrament of baptism, but he himself is not bound by his sacraments. And that is a great closing sentence. You can't put boundaries on God. And also this paragraph is a little more, shall we say, tentative in saying the fate of those who are not baptized. It says we really ought to do it because we don't know any other ordinary mechanism to ensure salvation, but we should be, I suppose, agnostic about the fate of people who have not been baptized. And here is another, well, actually two more sections, 1260 and 1261. Since Christ died for all, and since all men are in fact called to one and the same destiny, which is divine, we must hold that the Holy Spirit offers to all the possibility of being made partakers in a way known to God in the Paschal mystery. Every man who is ignorant of the gospel of Christ and of his church, but seeks the truth and does the will of God in accordance with his understanding of it, can be saved. It may be supposed that such a person would desire baptism explicitly if they had known its necessity. And with this, it might be useful to look at Romans chapter 1, where St. Paul talks about the fact that the existence of God and many of his attributes can be discerned just simply by understanding the world and the structure. And he goes on to say that people are really without excuse for not knowing God and at least seeking him. And I believe this passage says, yes, that's true. If you know him and seeking him, we can have hope that you will eventually find what you seek. Now, the next paragraph, 1261 here, talks about unbaptized infants. As regards children who have died without baptism, the church can only entrust them to the mercy of God, as she does in her funeral rites for them. Indeed, the great mercy of God, who desires that all men should be saved, and Jesus' tenderness to our children, which caused him to say, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them," allows us to hope that there is a way of salvation for children who have died without baptism. All the more urgent is the church's call not to prevent little children coming to Christ through the gift of the holy baptism. We can hope that there's a way, but we should not presume that we know this, because as the first paragraph I read to you says, we know of no other method of ensuring salvation other than baptism. With that being said, we're leaving limbo and we're going on to the next circle. And the first person, first monster we meet as we come into that circle is Minos, or Minos. Let's just call him Minos. What the heck? There stands Minos, grotesquely as he snarls, examining the guilty at the entrance. He judges and dispatches, tail in coils. By this I mean that when the evil soul appears before him, it confesses all, and he, who is the expert judge of sins, knows to what place in hell the soul belongs. The times he wraps his tail around himself tells just how far the sinner must go down. And here he is. This is an illustration by Doré, I think. Here's his tail, and Minos was a Greek mythological figure, king of Crete, that Dante borrowed from Virgil. An idea being he wraps his tail around himself, and however many coils it goes, that's how much the sinner is, that's what the number of the circle that the sinner goes to. Now, they all eagerly confess their sin, and it's interesting, perhaps, to consider that the damned lined up before Minos didn't go to confession on earth. If they did confess their sin and all that, they'd be going to purgatory or heaven or somewhere, but not here. So one of the first things they do in hell is confess to a monster, and a monster who's not going to give them absolution, who basically is an administrator of the punishment that they've really decreed on themselves by their obstinate refusal of mercy and grace. Another way you can look at Minos is he can be a symbol, or he can be seen as a guilty conscience. And unconfessed sin torments and tortures the soul and puts it in a sort of hell. All right, we got by Minos, and now we're fully getting into this circle. And now the notes of anguish start to play upon my ears. And now I find myself where sounds on sounds of weeping pound at me. I came to a place where no light shone at all, bellowing like the sea racked by a tempest, when warring winds attack it from both sides. The infernal storm, eternal in its rage, sweeps and drives the spirits with its blast. It whirls them, lashing them with punishment. When they arc, swept back past their place of judgment, then come the shrieks, laments, and anguished cries. There they blaspheme the power of Almighty God. I learned that to this place of punishment are all those whose sin in lust had been condemned, those who made reason slave to appetite. The last line is important. They made reason a slave to appetite. And thus, the contrapassio. Don't forget what contrapassio is. It's the sin made manifest, stripped of its delight. And so, since they were passionate and they're just going back and forth, tossed to and fro by the lust. Thus, that's what they get for eternity. And Dante goes on to describe it a bit more. And as the wings of starling in the winter bear them along in widespread crowded flocks, so does the wind propel the evil spirits. Now here, now there, and up and down, it drives them with never any hope to comfort them, hope not of rest, but even of suffering less. So it's pretty grim, and it's a grim metaphor to be sure. Once again, so here we go. Summary of the basic suffering here. We got the lustful. Those individuals who gave in to earthly desires without thought or reason. Why does this place them in a circle below the citadel? They denied reason. And once again, the contrapatio, the fittingness, the wind is symbol for the lack of continence, self-restraint. They cannot steady themselves. They couldn't steady themselves in life, and so they're not able to steady themselves in death, in the afterlife. We see a number of famous folks here. We have Lancelot, Cleopatra, Achilles, and I think perhaps Dante's being a little hard on Cleopatra. Not to say Cleopatra was a wonderful person, but she used her tryst or affairs with Mark Antony and Julius Caesar more to advance the political needs and her political career as Queen of Egypt rather than simply lust. So she's actually, at least at one point, being fairly reasonable, not exactly, so you say, noble or virtuous. And here we got, again, a few other folks. Two famous women residents of the second circle. Cleopatra, the Egyptian queen and lover of Antony and Julius Caesar, and Helen, wife of the king Menelaus of Sparta and prisoner of Paris of Troy. And the men include Achilles, Greek warrior killed by the Trojans by promising him the hand of a Trojan woman if he joined their cause. Paris himself, Trojan captor of Helen, and Tristan, lover of the wife of King Mark of Cornwall and killed by King Mark upon his discovery. And all these people are basically, well, not all of them. Of course, Cleopatra is certainly real, but some of these others are legendary. All right. Starstruck by such names, Dante feels sorry for them and calls out to a couple, wanting to talk to them. They approach and the female soul speaks. She's really polite and talks in a highfalutin style as if she's stuck in the rhetoric of courtly love, which she probably is. And this is courtly love gone really bad. She thanks Dante for being so kind as to speak nicely to her and then tells her story. And here it is, starting out. And Virgil is talking at the very beginning of this passage of Canto 5. And you'll see for yourself when they are closer. If you entreat them by that love of theirs that carries them along, they will come to you. As doves called by a desire to return to their sweet nest with wings outstretched and poised, float downward through the air guided by their will, so these two left the flock where Dido is and came towards us through the malignant air. And remember who Dido is. That's the lover of Aeneas that really sacrificed reason to lust. She was queen of Carthage, but she gave up her concern for her citizens, her subjects, shall we say, and everything, and fell madly in love, or maybe madly in lust with Aeneas, who eventually ditched her and she committed suicide. Such was the tender power of my call. O living creature, gracious and so kind, who makes your way here through this dingy air to visit us who stained the world with blood. If we could claim as friend the King of Kings, we would beseech him that he grant you peace, you who show pity for our atrocious plight. Okay, well, This doesn't really sound like someone who's sinned and is hell. She's not saying, "Oh, I'm a sinner" or whatever. Oh, well, the King of Kings is just not our buddy. If he was our buddy, we're sort of out in the outs with him. I would ask him to grant you peace. I know I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again, I'm sure, especially through Inferno. The idea of the untrustworthy or inaccurate narrator. And this is a literary device. And this untrustworthy narrator is certainly the case here. Francesca is an untrustworthy narrator. Dante's, the pilgrim, sometimes is in this story. So don't always believe what you're being told. Okay, it turns out this is Francesca and Paolo, who adulterous couple killed by Francesca's husband. And she's Francesca da Rimini, an Italian from Ravenna. And as it turns out, probably when Dante was writing this, we don't know exactly where he was writing this, but he may have been writing this as a guest of her nephew. And during her life, she was forced into a loveless political marriage with a guy called Giotto Malatestia. However, she fell in love with her husband's younger brother, Paolo, and had an affair with him. When discovered by the husband, he found an adultery, he killed them both. And he's in a deeper level of hell, Francesca tells us. Well, maybe so. Remember, Francesca can't know that, and she's an unreliable narrator. Love that kindles in the gentle heart sees this one for the beauty of my body torn from me. How it happened still offends me. Love that excuses no one love from loving sees me so strongly with delight in him that, as you see, he never leaves my side. Love led us straight to the sudden death together. Cana awaits the one who quenched our lives. And that last line is referring to the husband. That he's going to go down to the very deepest level of hell, one reserved to people who betray and kill and are treacherous to their family. These were the words that came from them to us. Then I turned to them and tried to speak. I said, Francesca, the torment that you suffer brings painful tears of pity to my eyes. But tell me, in that time of your sweet sighing, how and by what signs did love allow you to recognize your dubious desires? And she said to me, there's no greater pain than to remember in our present grief past happiness, as well your teacher knows. What a great line, huh? There's no greater pain than to remember in our present grief past happiness. Happens to be true. But if your great desire is to learn the very root of such a love as ours, I shall tell you, but in words of flowing tears. One day we read, to pass the time away, of Lancelot, how he had fallen in love. We were alone, innocent of suspicion. Time and again our eyes were brought together by the book we read, our faces flushed and paled. To the moment of one line alone we yielded. It was when we read about those long for lips now being kissed by such a famous lover that this one, who shall never leave my side, then kissed my mouth and trembled as he did. Agahut was that book, and he who wrote it. That day we read no further. And Galahut refers to a character in the story of King Arthur's court, Lancelot and Guinevere. This is a character who basically was the intermediary to produce their illicit love affair. So here's the thing. You're sitting there and you're reading about an illicit love affair, one that brought Camelot and King Arthur and that whole shining experiment to ruin. you're basically reading the medieval equivalent of at least softcore pornography, and you wonder what might be happening. And indeed, what might happen? Here's the book. Here they are, and they were doing this, and probably a lot more than just kissing, you imagine. And then in comes the husband, who decides that he's not particularly happy with that, and kills the both of them, and they end up in hell. Now, I'm going to show you this little film clip about a modern ballet about Francesca de Rimini, or at least a modern edition of it, where they, at least the mechanics of it. Here we go.
My name's Tarek. I'm the director of the project. It was kind of an experiment. Just seeing her in the room with the robots kind of got me thinking about the amount of control she has over her movement. The precision involved reminded me of working with robots.
I came to Botendole Christmas party, and I was at the party, Tarek was at the party, and the robot was at the party, and that's how it happened.
The tradition requires that they perform moves a specific way, and in order to do that, they do it over and over and over again. So I thought, let's see how this matches up with something that's really mechanical, like a robotically controlled camera.
Francesca de Rimini is one of the most beautiful love stories in the literature, and I feel like that was the ballet where everything came together, like music, story, the choreography. I didn't even doubt once that maybe I should have chosen something else.
I knew I needed some way to watch and study the choreography, and the way that we accomplished that was through a motion capture session. Motion capture gives you 3D data that allows you to reconstruct a virtual version of an actor moving through space. Cameras along the periphery of the room track points on an actor's body to collect data. After mocap session, I had 3D versions of Masha and Joanne. It's a process of watching things from different angles and start animating cameras and slowly make decisions about, oh, where do I want to be at this moment of the choreography? It was like I got to be in rehearsal. It feels like the camera's part of the choreography now.
I think I didn't realize till actually the day I walked into the studio with the robot how it was gonna be, how it would work. The biggest challenge was we had to be so precise with our movements and almost robotic. Even if he would throw me a little bit higher, that would mean that my foot would be probably out of focus. So it took a lot of takes as well because, you know, to achieve something like this, it wasn't easy.
In the end, it sort of feels like you're in the room with them dancing. It's a little bit more intimate than being in the theater.
ballet is an art form where in the evening you do performance, and tomorrow it can be the most amazing performance, but tomorrow it's gone. I feel like it's important for ballet to be on film because it stays in history, and then it's also much easier to introduce people to the art form.
Some of these shots could have been accomplished using other techniques, more traditional film techniques, and a lot more rehearsal time, but that wasn't the point. We proved that we could coordinate the camera around an actual dancer. Using this approach, we can either take a new lens on dance in the form of a film or apply this technology on a live stage.
I hope that showed up well for you. You just have to let me know how that did. But I hope you noticed, besides the, the fact that, again, Dante is still in our modern culture with this ballet and many, many other instances. But I thought the ballerina's comment at one point was curious in that she said that this was one of the most beautiful love stories in literature. When I heard this, I thought to myself, well, I don't know about that. This is not Hallmark romance. I mean, this is adulterous love affair that made these two people end up in hell. And I think that may say something about us in our present culture and how we may have a lot of besetting sin that may point us all to this circle of hell being a condemnation of our cultural sin and perhaps our own individual sins of lust in these areas. Now, I have another way of looking at this situation, and this I owe to Cook and Hersman in their project or talk on Dante that is in the teaching company, the great courses. And I certainly recommend their course. It's very, very good. And I did not see this part or angle of Paulo and Francesca, despite having read this account a number of times. I did not see this until Cook and Hersman pointed it out to me. And one thing to remember in this is how important St. Augustine and the Confessions were to Dante and how he uses that in his background. And to start off, this is the part of St. Augustine's Confessions, Book 8, where he's referring to his conversion. And St. Augustine, as we all know, had quite the struggle with lust in his life. It was very much one of his besetting sins, and it was one that kept him from conversion. As he famously said at one point, he prayed to God, Lord, give me a chastity, but not right now. Well, here is this passage of his Confessions. I was saying these things and weeping in the most bitter contrition of my heart, when suddenly I heard the voice of a boy or girl, I knew not which, coming from the neighboring house, chanting over and over again, "Pick it up, read it, pick it up, read it." Immediately I ceased weeping and began most earnestly to think whether it was usual for children in some kind of game to sing such a song, but I could not remember ever having heard the like. So damming the torrent of my tears, I got to my feet, for I could not but think that this was a divine command to open the Bible and read the first passage I should light upon. For I had heard how Anthony, accidentally coming to church while the gospel was being read, received the admonition as if what was read had been addressed to him. Go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. By such an oracle, he was forthwith converted to you. And this, of course, is the famous command that God used to the little child, perhaps a little angel, maybe. Tole lege, take up and read. Take up and read. Tole lege. So, I quickly returned to the bench where Aloysius was sitting, for there I had put down the apostles' book, when I left it there. I snatched it up, opened it, and in silence read the passage on which my eyes first fell. Not in rioting, in drunkenness, not in chambering or wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill the lusts therein. I wanted to read no further, nor did I need to, for instantly as the sentence ended, there was infused in my heart something like the light of full certainty, and all the gloom of doubt vanished away. This is a central idea of Paolo and Francesca. Consider that Francesca said, as they read the story of the Lancelot and Guinevere that incited their lust, that they read no further. St. Augustine said the same thing. He said right here, I wanted to read no further, nor did I need to. So, that day they read no further, and they committed the sin of lust, and they ended up in hell. St. Augustine that day read no further and committed his life to Christ. We often wonder how we end up in the places we do, why we end up in the dark woods. Dante didn't really know. He fell asleep. He was asleep. He woke up. But there's decision after decision, sometimes micro decisions that make our pathway one way or another, either to heaven or to hell. And we may not really look at them or understand them until much later. St. Augustine is writing this several decades after he made this decision, but he realizes that it was a very pivotal thing that decided his fate, just as the decision that Paolo and Francesca, that day they read no further, that sealed their fate as well. I'm going to try a little experiment here. There is a recording of Peter Tchaikovsky's Francesca de Rimini. He wrote this after he took a train to Germany. And while he's on the train, he read Dante's Divine Comedy. He read Canto 5. He was really taken with that. So, at one point, sometime in the 1870s, he wrote a poem, a symphonic poem, a musical rendition of this canto. And you can see the parts of it. And first of all, there's an introduction where the bass and wind section suggests the beginning of Dante's Inferno in the dark wood. And then you got the music continuing, and he feels the horror coming into the first circles of hell. Then he gets to the circle where he meets Paolo and Francesca de Rimini, and they're in this giant storm. Then they stop and they tell the story. And as they tell the story, the music becomes very quiet and very mellow till they get to the point where they are murdered, and that gets to be a bit of a rather dramatic. But then as they end, the music of the wind, the eternal storm, takes over, and they're lost in that storm. And as one comment, this is one comment in the comments section of the YouTube video, no composer can evoke hell like Tchaikovsky. Beautiful. I cry when I listen to it. Well, perhaps so. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach a version of the Moscow Symphony Orchestra playing this at the end of the video. And I do not know if it'll take. You'll have to let me know if it takes, you can hear it. If not, you can simply go to YouTube and look for the Moscow Symphony Orchestra playing Francesca de Rimini by Tchaikovsky, and you can get it. So, in any event, I hope this will play for you. We shall see.